Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, where I take a particular historical topic and give some background on it and explain its story. So every Friday and Saturday, we answer questions from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern, and then on Sundays, we do a live stream lecture where I will present a particular topic, and usually there's a little bit of a Q&A that follows at the very end because people have a lot of questions. So yes, if you're new to it and just joining us, welcome. Really appreciate the support. If you can like and subscribe and become a friendly neighborhood historian, it's as easy as that. Hello, Hars. Good to see you. And today's topic, as every topic has become, is voted on YouTube. So if you want to find out what topic we are going to be doing, just go and check the YouTube page here, and you can vote on which topic you would like to see me present on. And today is going to be one of my favorite topics, an interesting topic, and the topic of one of my most recent videos. I do long-form videos every Monday and Friday that come out at 8 p.m. Eastern on those days. And this is the 7 Roman kings. I'm going to be discussing the Roman kingdom. So a lot of people know about the Roman Empire. Almost as many people know about the Roman Republic. And almost everybody knows about Rome as a civilization and what it meant in both a republican and imperial form. But a lot of people don't know about the Roman kingdom, which is the early Roman state and the early Roman society. So we are... I think you guys will really enjoy that, and it's good to see everybody, Ryan and Raja, and of course Hars, my wonderful moderator, who will put the social media handles in the chat for all of us. So yes, if you like history, social studies, you're in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing, and buckle up as we talk about one of my favorite topics, and a topic from that video, which you guys can go check out for more details, the Roman emperors. The Roman kings, the kingdom of the Republic, so the kingdom of Rome. So, of course, many people are familiar probably with this symbol, SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, which is the Senate and the people of Rome. This is the Roman Republic, which lasted from about 509 BC to about 31 BC. And although the Senate and Assembly predated 509 BC and the rise of it, which we'll talk about later, and continued even after the end of the Republic and the rise of the first Emperor Augustus in 31 BC, this is 509 to 31 BC is usually considered the lifespan of the Republic being the main and only premier form of government for Rome. And it took Rome from a very small city-state with very little influence relative to their Italian neighbors, like the Sabini and, of course, the Etruscans, to being one of the largest powerhouses in the ancient world that was primed to be an empire with the rise of the Caesars in the 1st century BC. But even before that, Rome was a kingdom, and the Senate and Assembly and the elements of the Republic did exist in that kingdom with 7 different kings. And you can't see all of them here, but they are some of the most fascinating and interesting people in history that you don't know a lot about. Most of what we know about them comes from 2 Roman historians or 2 Roman scholars, Titus Livy and Cicero, the great writer, and they were writing and documenting the lives of these Roman kings and the rise of the Republic from a very republican, anti-monarchical perspective in the late 1st century. When the Roman Republic was falling, they wanted to give a republican vision of what Rome would look like, and so they presented the kings as evil tyrants, and justified their demise. Most of the accounts that they came from oral histories and other writings that have been lost to time. The truth of the matter is we don't know fully the story of all of these men and what they were really like, but we have a general understanding, and I'm going to go based off of the arguments from Cicero and Livy. Although understand that they are not just writing history, they are making an argument against kings and for the republican government that they love so much, which was decimated later on. Titus Livy wrote, he's probably the most dependable source of early Roman history, but he was writing 400 years after most of these events happened. And of course, Rome did not look anything like this. Rome was not a flourishing giant city with all sorts of incredible amphitheaters and forums and baths and chariot races and a strong, robust army. It was a tiny little city-state in the middle of Italy that really did not amount to much. The city of Roma, compared to its neighbors who were all extraordinarily overpowered, most notably their northern enemies, the Etruscans. But yes, there were 7 Roman kings, and they are, of course, Romulus, who is considered not only the first Roman king, but the founder of the city of Rome, who took power in 753 BC when he built the city, according to basically legend. Then there's Numa, Tullius Hostilius, Acrinus, or Acrius, then the 3 Etruscan rulers, Tarquinius Superbus, Servius, and Tarquinius uh, uh, I forget his, it was Tarquin the Proud, and Tarquin the Younger. So there's 7 Roman kings who rule for about 2.5 centuries. And again, we don't know exactly what the dimensions of their rule was. We don't know how much of this is legendary and how much of this is actually historical. Some of it is even mythical and obviously serves to tell a story and etiology of why the Roman people are who they are and how things came to be in the city of Rome the way they are. Of course, Rome is the eternal city. The Romans had this idea that their city had lasted forever, and it is on the 7 hills. Just a short shout out here to someone else who was very important in Roman writing in the 1st century. Virgil, the famous Roman poet and writer, tells a very different story in his epic, the Aeneid, which is supposed to be the 3rd installation in a trilogy of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. So the Iliad and the Odyssey were written by Homer about the destruction of Troy by the Greeks, and the Aeneid is supposed to be an addendum to that, written by Virgil, which says the founding of Rome actually came from a people who settled who escaped, Aeneas and his followers escaped from Troy when it was destroyed 1100 years before the birth of Christ, and they got to the Italian peninsula, settled the town, and eventually expanded and built the city of Rome. So many Romans believed that they were the descendants of the Trojans, which justified their constant fighting and aggression against the Greeks, who they ended up subduing. They also inculcated Greek culture, religion, and architecture and art into their society. As you can see here, the different types of columns and arches, these are all based on Greek ideas that the Romans found to be extraordinarily important. Mind you, Magna Graecia, which was parts of Sicily and southern Italy, were controlled by the Greeks for a very, very long time. So, just a quick shout out that there is an alternative theory of how Rome came to be. The most obvious historical explanation that is not full of patriotic or Republican, small r Republican, banter from the Romans is the idea that Rome was actually just one small city-state that emerged at that time. We don't know necessarily who founded it. A group of people of Latin background were there, and they eventually clashed with their neighbors like the Sabines and of course, or the Sabini, and of course the Etruscans to the north. Whether there was a Romulus and a Remus or any of the other 6 kings in Roman history is hard to tell. Obviously, at some point, the Etruscans, which were a much stronger force, conquered and controlled Rome, making it a vassal for quite some time, and eventually the Romans were able to shake off their influence, although for centuries to come they would continue fighting them until basically destroying them in the 3rd century. What we do know is that by the 4th, 5th, 3rd century, BC, we have a rise of a republican form of government that is unifying for the Roman people, and obviously Livy and Cicero would tell you that comes from the overthrowing of the tyrants. Obviously, they have political motivations. They're writing at a time when the Roman Republic is declining. There is a battle between the optimates and the populares. The optimates are the conservative, traditional senators and assemblymen, and the populares are senators and officials who are pushing for popular demands. And of course, some of their figures, like Sulla and later Julius Caesar, will undermine and eventually help overthrow the Republic. And because of this, people like Cicero and Livy, who absolutely hate that, are going to show that the Republic is the answer to the problem, even if it has become corrupt. So these are not unbiased parties writing about this. They're obviously pro-Roman. They're obviously going to have patriotic influences, and they're obviously going to write from a perspective of anti-monarchical structure. So however much these Roman kings accomplished is undermined by them being tyrants, which is, of course, based in a Latin word meaning ruling over. So, yes, and I am back in my smoking jacket. I hope you're enjoying what you're listening to. If you do, please like and subscribe. And we're going to be going for about, I don't know how long it's going to take to get through the talk about the Roman Empire or the Roman Kingdom, but afterwards there might be time for a Q&A. So hang tight if you have any questions. We'll probably, hopefully, get there to answer them. And I don't know if social medias are in the chat. They are. Thank you so much, Horace, my wonderful moderator, for holding it down. Any banter and conversation you want to have, you are welcome to. It's just good to see everybody. A very happy Sunday to all of you. Always a pleasure to have you here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. So I've given you the background of the rise of the Roman Kingdom. Now let's talk about what actually happened, or what the Romans said happened. So obviously, this is the Capitoline Wolf. Now, Rome has 7 hills. The Eternal City on the 7 hills, one of those hills is the Capitoline Hill. That is one of the most important hills in for the Romans. It's between 2 of the major hills. I think it's Capitoline, and I'm trying to remember the name of the other, Palatine. They build their forum, which is their civic center, their economic center, one of the most important areas in Rome. And And the Capitoline Hill is where we get the term capital, being a building or a city of importance and control over a government. And the wolf is also named the Capitoline wolf. Now, why am I showing you a picture or a painting of a wolf? It's not a picture. This is the Capitoline wolf. She is the mother of Rome in some ways. And if you look, she is suckling two infant humans. These are two twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, who supposedly were abandoned by their parents, who may have been killed. I'm not sure what the legend actually says. And they were raised by a she-wolf. Now, obviously, this just seems completely ludicrous, and as we go along, things become more historical and less mythical. But the idea that the Romans wanted their first leaders to be raised by a wolf shows bravery, resilience, a connection with nature, strength, and power. The lupine nature of Romulus and Remus is a credit to the Roman idea of resistance, of surviving against the odds and overcoming adversity, being raised in the most crazy of circumstances by a wolf who can tell the importance of these two young boys, so much so that she decides to suckle and raise them. Did this happen? Probably not. I mean, okay, no, it didn't happen. But is it interesting that sometimes mythology is more true to a people and their culture than the actual facts are? Yes, that's very telling in all societies and all civilizations. And even now with photographs, cameras, the internet, and smartphones, we are no different than the ancient Romans. We make up legends and myths, and sometimes those legends and myths are truer to us than the actual things that are happening. So did Romulus and Remus even exist is another difficult question, because we really don't know, to be sure. But basically, Romulus and Remus, according to the legends, grow strong and powerful, and eventually they decide to build a city. And as they are building this city in this area around these different hills, the seven of them, Esquime, Palatine, Capitoline, I can't name all of them. There's 4 ones in the middle, and then there's 3 to the south, I think, and those are the 7 hills that surround the city. And if you build a city around hills, it's going to be very important. Also extremely important to any city is the river. And the river that Rome is built on is the Tiber. And it is named, and you've got Roman emperors like Tiberius named after this, but Tiber is a derivative of the god of the river, Tiberinus. So the Romans, like many other ancient civilizations, start along a river, and they believe there is a deity connected to that river, the same way the Egyptians believe that the Nile was the blood of Osiris. The Romans are inclined to believe that Tiberinus, the god, is the overseeing god of the Tiber River. Now, you may say, wait, I thought all of the Roman gods were from the Greeks. Some of them, most of them were. But that's actually anachronistic in its own way, and I'll get to explaining that later. Yes, the Roman kings set up a style of worship that would later be appropriated into being the Greek gods of yore, but these gods were being worshipped by the Romans centuries before in different forms. It was only with prolonged exposure to Magna Graecia and eventually their conquest of the Greeks that the Romans said, hey, these gods that we've been worshiping are actually Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, and so on and so forth. But Tiberinus is one of the Roman gods that is worshipped. Another god that they worshipped was Quirinius, who is later turned into, this is called the Archaic Triad, by the way. And I believe it's Romulus who sets up the worship of the Archaic Triad, but it's the 3 main gods that the Romans decide to worship in the ancient period, Archaic. The main overarching god, who is later identified as Zeus, but the Romans call him Jupiter. I prefer the way the British call him Jove, by the way. And then you have, who I mentioned before, Tiberinus, the god of a river, and Rome is on the southern edge of the Tiber River, or on the south end of the Tiber River, and of course, Quirinius, who becomes Janus, who is the god of beginnings, and that is why January is the beginning month. There you go. Now, the more you know. Today I learned, which is a video series I do on this channel all the time. So, where are we? You've got... hopefully you're enjoying what you're hearing. If you are, like and subscribe, all that great stuff. So the Romans have these mythological figures, and their worship is going to be very important. Obviously, Capitoline Hill, the Capitoline Wolf, all of these legends are extremely important to the Roman identity and to forming a Roman patriotic message, even if it's total bunk and nonsense and none of it happened. Like this didn't happen. I can basically guarantee, I can guarantee you that. Did Romulus and Remus exist? Probably unlikely as well. Did Aeneas exist? Pretty much no. None of these legends really have any fruit to them, but there is a possibility that there was some sort of Roman ruler who established the city and helped build it and create it. It was obviously a farmland. It was near a river, so you can farm. And maybe there was some sort of unifying figure who decided to build a civilized settlement there that became the city of Rome. Rome, its reason it's called Rome is what is, and not Rheme, is because Romulus kills Remus. That's the next big part of the story, and seizes power for himself in 753 BC. Soon after building the city. So I believe it's April 1st, not 1st, that's April Fool's Day, which is, there's a reason behind that too, but I think it's April 21st. It's a day in April. A date in April is the actual day that the Romans say that it was originally, their city was founded by Romulus and Remus. Romulus kills Remus and becomes the sole ruler of the Romans and starts building a civilization. His male followers need female companions, and so this begins the interactions with the other Latin people, which ends in horrible abuse. It's called the abuse of the Sabine women. It is one of the saddest tragedies in all of Italian and Latin and Roman history, where basically Romulus uses his forces to basically kidnap and take advantage of a bunch of Sabine women to create a lineage for him and his closest followers. The years go by, and Romulus basically decides, as he's building Rome and the early settlements, the early merchant. I don't know if he built the original form. I think they believe he did. I'm not sure. But eventually Romulus decides that he needs a advisory council who will help select the next ruler after him. So according to the legend, he chooses a group of 100 men to surround him and be his supporters and advisors. And this is his group, his Senatus. This is the Senate. This is the origins of the Senate. The Senate was originally supposed to be an advisory body for the king, and they would be the ones who voted on the new king. The senators wouldn't just vote on the new king, but a group of the people would, a comita, which is where we get committee, and so that is the origins of Senate and Assembly. Now notice something here. This could easily be shooting the arrow and then drawing the target. The Roman Republican government operated with a Senate and a Assembly. The Assembly would be the representatives of the people, and the senators would meet in another building, the Curia Hostilia, which we'll talk about in a second. This could be them going back and saying, well, it's actually Romulus who started this tradition of having the senators, and then later on the assembly of people would decide, the senators would recommend a candidate, they would vote on the candidate would become the king. It's very easy to go back to your most ancient of legends and origins and say, this is what's happening, this is what's happening there. This is where it comes from. It comes from the most ancient origins of our society and civilization. It's very, very easy for them to say, hey, this is something that we've been doing for a while. Where did it come from? Well, it came from Romulus, and that gives a lot of teeth and weight and value to it, something that Livy and Cicero probably wanted to do as their beloved republic collapsed around them. Although Livy is a little bit more of a fan of the imperials than his predecessor Cicero. And Tacitus, who writes about this also, I believe he's in the employ of the empire, was very, very fond of making the kings look good. So not everything about the Roman monarchs is just politicized propaganda against them. Some of it is actually quite complimentary in respect. Let me see. So Romulus does not have an heir. The Roman kingdom does not pass through lineage. It is an elected position in some ways. At least that's what it's, again, my whole point is it's very, very easy for the Roman Republic to go, and their writers, in order to justify the Republic, say, yes, this has ancient origins. It goes all the way back to Romulus. We don't know exactly when the Roman Senate got started, but it probably did in some sort of advisory role over the next 2 centuries. There was obviously something that was already there from the patrician class, which is the upper class where the senators came from. The assembly, the comita, was made up of the plebeians. There to build on by the 6th century. So yes, the Roman Senate definitely did exist and definitely was created in some way, shape, or form by the Roman kings in the 8th, 7th, or 6th centuries. So what else was I going to say? Those are so I've got Romulus and Remus here. So what happens next? So Romulus dies after, I think, about 30 years on the throne. By the way, something I want to shout out and mention, the eagle is obviously extremely important. The eagle is a symbol of Jupiter, Jove, or Zeus. And Zeus, as I mentioned before, is one of the three gods the Romans are worshiping. They don't know it to be Zeus. They reappropriate it as Zeus after they intermingle with and conquer the Grecian world, the Hellenistic world. But basically, the eagle being a symbol of Rome and then becoming a symbol for all sorts of European powers, is based on Jupiter, Jove, or Zeus originally. It is a symbol of his might and power. So there you go there. So after Romulus dies, Romulus also builds up the kingdom a little bit. You could call it a city-state kingdom, whatever you want to call it, through conquest of local areas. After violence comes peace under his successor, Numa Pompilio, who is far more focused on civic building and building up an actual infrastructure. He gives more power to the Senate. He's a fascinating fellow. He's much more tactful, and he's much more interested in religious creativity. So the archaic triad, really, the worship of that kicks up during his time. The earliest temples are built during him, and he sets up a religious hierarchy that will answer to the king. So unlike the Brahmins in India, who start off as the ones in power and then dictate it to the ones below them, Numa Pompilio will be a king who dictates power to those beneath him. And by the way, I've done videos on both the Roman kingdom and the Varna Hindu system, so please go check those out. But Numa is more of a peaceful, docile monarch, more focused on domestic and civic policy, and his greatest achievement is the creation of the Roman religious order, with the most important religious figure, who is his son-in-law, becoming known as the bridge builder, the Pontifex Maximus. And if that name sounds familiar to you, it is because it is not only used by the high priest of the ancient Roman religion, and then later by the Roman emperors, but by this man. Yes, the Roman Catholic Pope is an inheritor of an ancient Roman tradition, of an ancient Roman religious tradition. So if that isn't interesting, I don't know what is. The Roman emperors consider themselves to be the Pontifex Maximus. Roman politicians during the Republic called themselves the Pontifex Maximus. The highest rank in the Roman Republic, I believe, is the Pontifex Maximus. Or it's it's the highest religious rank. So it's during the kingdom, it's during the Republic, it's during the empire, and it's during the religious survivor of the Roman society, which is the Roman Catholic Church. So that's kind of fascinating to think of too. Pope Leo XIV considers himself to be the Pontifex Maximus, as have all the hundreds of popes that have existed throughout Christian history. So there's a little something. So it's beyond just a Roman position. It is a religious position that continues into modern Catholicism and has spread its influence and importance has spread all over the world. But yes, that is all because of Numa Pompilio, who will put his son-in-law in charge of that, and that will be significant later for the succession, because his son-in-law wants to take power from him, but his grandson will actually be the one who becomes not the next king, but the king after that. So Numa, more of a domestic reformer. I'm trying to think. I think he's the one who builds this. There's one of them, and I can't remember exactly who it is, who builds the Circus Max. No, it's someone else later. But one of them is going to build the Circus Maximus, which is the first major Roman performance center. After him comes Tullius Hostilius. By the way, remember, these kings are elected. Hostilius obviously gives a huge implication of who he is. He is well known for his defeat of the Albions. He wins battles against the Veii people as well as the Etruscans, and he expands Rome's land holdings. By the way, Rome as a city at this point still does not occupy all of the Seven Hills, but it does have several vassal states. It has conquered certain peoples. It pacified the Sabines under Romulus, and then Tullius Hostilius is going to carry on that legacy. He's obviously a much more aggressive, violent monarch, and obviously Hostilius, the hostile. Interesting stuff. What happens next? Well, Tullius Hostilius is going to be, he's going to do one big contribution. He is going to build a actual place for the senators to meet, and this becomes the Curia Hostilia, and it is an inner building, and on the outside is where the assembly and the people actually meet in the Comita. And Vincent, I very much appreciate the support. Thank you so much. And this is, yes. And this is indeed Tullius Hostilius, the third Roman king. So if you're keeping track, it's Romulus is the first one. Then you've got Numia Pompilia, who builds the Roman religious order, the earliest temples. And now you have Tullius Hostilius, who's an extremely good fighter, but is also good at certain civic accomplishments, such as building the Curia Hostilia to create a place for senators to meet and do stuff. So what's happening? So, by the way, Saeed is asking about the Latin language. Italian is a derivative of Latin. It's not. It's because the Italian peninsula was conquered by people who were not Latin speakers originally. So there you go. It's a mix of Latin and it's a Latin-based language that is used by the European Italian people who are descendants of the different barbarians who conquered Italy. Remember, the Byzantines controlled it for a while. There, just a quick answer that is connected to this. So you've got Tullius, and he's obviously got his military record pretty well intact. After him, power struggle sees power returning to Pompilia. I don't have a picture of his grandson, but Pompilia's grandson, Acrinus, will come to power, or Macrinius. I never get his name right. But Acrinus is basically obsessed with. He's also an expansive emperor king. He's going to build up Rome's control along the southern Tiber, winning several different engagements against several different people. Again, the Etruscans tend to be their biggest enemy to the north. The Etruscans are a much more advanced, developed city-state society. Like many of the different Latin peoples, you have different Italian tribes that have much more influence, and of course you have. I don't know if it's prevalent then, but it's going to be prevalent later, Greek settlements in the south of Italy and in Sicily. But he's going to get all the way to the Mediterranean and build the first Roman port, a city that exists to this day called Ostia. And I'm pointing at him, but it's really his grandson. So you've got Acrinus, who is the fourth one. He's going to be responsible for getting Rome all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, which is fascinating because in a few centuries, the Mediterranean will be the Roman lake. So how it started versus how it's going is very, very different when you consider the fact that they had just barely within a century of being founded gotten all the way to Ostia and built up ports on the Mediterranean. Again, take all of this with a grain of salt, if you will, but the truth of the matter is Rome is growing. It's a slow but steady growth, and probably these achievements are attributed to Roman rulers later on by the historians, but are things that the Roman people were already doing, maybe by some sort of consensual agreement and some sort of ruler over all of them, who we don't know exactly who that is, who may very well have been Tullius Hostilius, Numa Pompilia, or Acrinus. So, Anchius. It's not Anchius. And no, the Etruscans did not begin the Roman Empire, and it's ET, not AT. So a power struggle does ensue, and this is probably where we got to give the credit to the Etruscans, because the Etruscans are the most powerful force in central and northern Italy at this time, and they are primarily situated in west central and northern Italy, and they are going to, and probably around this point, they conquer the Romans. They overcome the city and create a vassal state and establish their own mini dynasty within these 7 kings. The next 3 kings will all be Etruscan rulers, with Tarquinius and his son and a man in between them. So you've got Tarquin the Elder, Servius, and Tarquin the Proud. So the first 4 are all Romans. The next 3 are going to be an Etruscan occupation, which is seen as even more tyrannical by the Roman historians, who want to make it clear that they still love Roman rulers more than they do foreign rulers, but they hate ruling altogether in many, many ways. So Tarquin the Elder is going to come in. He is the one that builds the Circus Maximus, and despite being loyal to the Etruscans, he is going to defeat them in many different battles. He's going to expand the land holdings. And under him and his successor, Rome will expand as a city and control all of the 7 hills. So Rome finally reaches its 7-hill threshold during his win. And so you've got his rise being extremely important. He rules for like 40 years. He's probably the most successful of all of these different kings. Some of these rulers, you've got Numa, he ruled for 40 years. These kings do not rule for short amounts of time. And again, Tarquin changes the narrative a little bit, and he's going to push the Romans more and more towards this idea of a real tyranny, because he is not elected as previous ones were. He kind of just sees his power. The Senate approves him, but the people, the Comitia, does not vote for him. The assembly does not vote for him. And so it's a very different dynamic between him and his predecessors that will be the case when he dies. And he wants to, and there's this debate about, does power turn over to his son Tarquinius, or does power turn over to somebody else? One of his most reliable generals and advisors, a man named Servius, rises to the throne. And Servius, as the name might imply, was probably a slave who actually became a reliable general and advisor to Tarquinius, and then was able to use that to usurp both the Senate and the assembly to actually become the king in his own right. And his reign is going to be interesting because he is going to standardize the worship, he's going to build more temples, and he's going to realign the religious order from being about the archaic triad of Quirinius, aka Janus, Zeus, and I forget the third one, Tiberius, the god of the Tiber River, and to show that Rome, and this is later anachronistic again, but the worship of Minerva, who the Romans, that's their interpretation of Athena, the goddess of wisdom from ancient Greece, Zeus, and Ares, the god of war, or as the Romans call him, Mars. So the archaic triad will become the Capitoline triad. That is the building of the early temples to these Roman gods will begin during his reign, and he will also probably start a calendar system, as well as a Roman. It was Numa who started the calendar. He will begin possibly the coinage system, although that even the historians from Rome who are writing centuries later are not sure whether or not he actually did that, but there are attributions that he is the first one to establish a coinage system. Again, he's an Etruscan, he's the second Etruscan, he's a slave who rises and seizes power, and his position is extremely precarious. Because his position is extremely precarious, he is interested in expanding the suffrage, the ability to vote, to more and more people in the city so that he can hold on to power. But this doesn't really work for him. And things start to fall apart. The center does not hold. And eventually he is overthrown and kicked down the stairs, supposedly by Tarquin's son, Tarquinius Superbus, who is Tarquin the Elder, or Tarquin the Proud. And he is the one who is perhaps the one, other than Romulus, who you may know about. Tarquin the Proud is far more arrogant, far more cocky, supposedly far more despotic than even his father and his predecessor were, and basically ignores the wishes of the Senate and the Assembly, and basically believes that he can create a lineage-based kingdom, succeeding from his father and then turning power over rather than being elected. He's going to rule for a few decades, just like all the other ones did, but he's going to become more and more despotic, more and more of a tyrant, and more unpopular. And from kicking his predecessor literally to the curb, to brutalizing the people of Rome, to allying with the Etruscans and doing kind of what they want, he is horrifyingly reviled by all of the ancient historians, who again are writing from a very pro-Roman perspective and don't have any love for the Etruscans, and they don't have any love for a proud and arrogant ruler who will devastate their land, and they believe that Tarquinius Superbus is indeed this ruler. What happens next? The worst part of all of this, it comes when basically Tarquin, acting as a dictator, believing he can have everything he wants, decides to steal the wife of one of the senators from the patrician class. There are different patrician families that have become well established in the last 2 centuries as vital to Roman identity. One of them are the Bruti. And Marcus Junius Brutus is a loyal member of the Senate, and his wife, Lucretia, is taken by Tarquin and taken advantage of. So you have a bookend and book beginning sort of thing, where it was first the Sabine women who were captured, abducted, and had taken advantage of in order for Romulus to build up his city. And then at the end of the kingdoms, you have Tarquin the Proud stealing away the wife of one of his senators and taking advantage of her. This causes an uproar amongst the Senate, which leads to a revolution, and in 509, he is overthrown. In 509, he is defeated and driven out, and by 507, the Etruscans are completely driven out, and Rome ends its position as a vassal state. It will continue to struggle with the Etruscans and their presence and their invasiveness for the next several years, but things will get better for the Romans as they become an independent society. And according to the writers, who themselves are very pro-republic, the Roman people decide that they don't want to have a dictator, tyrant, or king to control them. That is why, despite the fact that the Roman Empire emperors will have far more power than any Roman king ever did, they will never use that term to refer to themselves because of the bitter taste that is left in Roman society because of the histories and legends surrounding Romulus, Numa Pompilius, Tullius Hostilius, Acreus, Tarquin the Elder, Servius, and especially Tarquin the Proud Superbus, and the fall of the Etruscan colonization of Rome in the 6th century. So the Republic rises out of the ashes and becomes extraordinarily powerful and extraordinarily strong. It creates two different branches of government. It creates an extremely efficient law code. It creates a bicameral legislature, basically where you have a Senate based on class distinction. So you have the patrician senators and you have the plebeians who form their own constituency, the assembly. And over the next few centuries, they will conquer all of Italy, all of Greece, significant portions of modern-day Spain and France. They will get into Anatolia and Turkey. They will go north into Switzerland, what is now Switzerland, and they will get as far east as North Africa. They will fight wars against the Carthaginians to destroy their main rival in the Western Mediterranean, and then fight wars against the Greeks to destroy their main rival in the Eastern Mediterranean. And eventually, of course, the Republic will fall as it becomes corrupt and bloated, and new populist rhetoric overthrows it. But the idea, even this populist rhetoric, rather than seeing itself as kings and tyrants, wants to see itself as an empire based on the name Caesar, rather than any idea of the ancient Roman kings, who continue to be some of the most hated individuals throughout all of Roman history. But as much as the Republic, the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, as much as these things are extremely important to the history of Rome, the truth of the matter is you can't have the story of the rise of Rome, this early city-state with shoddy details like many early civilizations, without the stories of the 7 monarchs, the 4 Roman monarchs and the 3 Etruscan colonizers. And so that story is quintessential to why Rome became the first major republic in world history. So there you go. Took me a little less. I thought it was going to take me longer to do this, but we got through it in about 35 minutes or so. So hope you really enjoyed that. If you have questions about that, please don't hesitate to ask. And I have a video about the Roman rulers here on YouTube that you can go and check out and learn more about. I have a live stream lecture from about a year ago about the Roman Senate and where it came from. So really good stuff there, to be sure. But thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to be here for another 20 minutes or so answering, as I pretend I have a fake watch, answering your questions. It wasn't too warm today, so I was able to wear my smoking jacket. But thank you everyone for really joining us. And if you have questions about history, social studies, and the like, hopefully about this, what we just talked about, please consider dropping them in the chat. Become a friendly neighborhood historian by subscribing. It's as easy as that. And if you want to donate and help the channel grow, do a super comment or something like that, join as a member, or you can subscribe on my Patreon, where you get early access and other stuff there. So yes. Could Rome have survived the space age? Rando, good to see you as always. It would have been interesting to see what would happen if the Roman Empire had survived. Really, I don't know how long the Roman Empire could survive, but a lot of people see the turning point as Commodus coming to the throne in 180 AD and basically starting to undo all of the gains of his father, Marcus Aurelius. Could Hannibal have ended Roman Empire? The Roman Empire didn't exist in Hannibal's time. He was an existential threat to the Republic during the Second Punic War in the late 3rd century BC. And when I say late 3rd century, that's like 220, 230, 210, not 280, 290, because back in those days, it went backwards. So the early 1900s AD would be 1910, 1920. The late 1900s, the early 1900s BC would be 1980 BC, 1990 BC. Just a quick point of conclusion. But yes, Hannibal was an existential threat. He was really good at fighting the Romans where they were, but eventually the Romans got smart and defeated him with Africanus. He got close, but I don't know exactly. Who discovered electricity? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, we've got experiments with electricity going back throughout ancient human history. We obviously think about the conduction of electricity. I mean, electricity has always existed, but conducting electricity, being able to use it and master it, that's really a 19th and 18th century discovery. And Tesla discovered the alternating current. Yeah, I did enjoy that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. What a violent time of strife. So who translated all this Greek into Roman, Greek to Latin, like the tragedies, Homer? Different Roman scholars did that. Basically, the Romans saw what the Greeks were doing culturally, architecturally, and religiously and said, more of that, but in our own ways and in our own versions. So it was cultural appropriation. It's one of the biggest examples of cultural appropriation in human history is how the Romans took from the Greeks basically the vast majority of their architecture, fashion, culture, and reapplied it to themselves. Oh, Simon the Bunny is here. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Our longtime moderator, Simon the Bunny, and Hartz was here earlier. I don't know if he still is. By the way, I believe it was Tarquin the Elder who was the first Roman to supposedly celebrate a triumph after a victory. It was either Acreus or Tarquinius, Tarquin the Elder, who celebrated a triumph as a celebration of his many victories on the battlefield. So the Romans wanted their traditions, be it the Circus Maximus, be it their religion, be it their worship of these gods that they later learned had these Greek identities. They retconned a lot of it, but they wanted this to be stuff from the 6th and 7th centuries BC, not something that just came about right before BC became AD. What were the plot? I mean, the older something is, the more likely that the more important and the more integral it is to your culture, the more ingrained it is in your ancient culture, the more likely you think it is to be true. What were the pots that they found in Egypt, which some historians believe they were a primitive battery? I don't know exactly. I've heard that before. I've heard a little bit about this. Obviously, the Rosetta Stone was discovered by Napoleon. Cultural appropriation is just flattery in the form of mimicking. That's an interesting way to put it, but yes, the imitation is the best form of flattery, and the Romans flattered the Greeks quite often, including destroying them. That's not exactly flattery, but that's something the Romans did a lot of. So, destruction, appropriation, interesting. Any successful empire I am finding, be it the Mughal in India, the Mongols in their different khanates, or the Romans, had an ability to tolerate their local societies and integrate their local civic societies and their cultures into their own space. The Mughal Empire, despite being a Muslim-based empire, decided, and with Mongol lineage, decided to tie itself to the identity of India by not forcing the Hindus to pay the tax, the jizya, that Muslims require their subjects, non-Muslim subjects, to pay. The Mongols, wherever they went, basically decided that they would take the society and the culture, the art, the fashion, the history, and basically adopt it as a way for them to become popular amongst the people, so the people wouldn't revolt. The Romans had a level of religious and, believe it or not, religious and societal toleration to the point where Egyptian gods were worshipped by Romans for a long time, and the Roman emperors styled themselves as Egyptian pharaohs because of their conquest of Egypt under Augustus. And the Greeks and the Romans definitely had a toxic relationship. It's a big brother, little brother relationship where the little brother eventually overcomes the big brother and then puts his boot on his face, basically. It's not a Chinese robe. I appreciate the compliment, and I love Chinese culture. I would love not a Chinese robe, a kimono would be nice, but this is a heavier. This is I think it's velour, but it's a smoking jacket, which the British made popular in the 19th century. So, questions about the Roman Empire, questions about history. I answered the question about Rome, about Romulus and Remus. Rome certainly wasn't built in a day. Let me see. And yes, you can join us for Q&As here on Friday at 6 and Saturday at 6, and you can join us on Instagram for Q&A on Fridays at 7. And yes, thank you for joining us this Sunday for the lecture. We've got about 15 more minutes. Usually we go about an hour. So again, I look at my fake watch. If you have a question or a topic you'd like me to discuss, I'd be happy to do it if it's related to this or something else from history. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. It really helps the channel a lot, especially if you enjoyed this. But And make sure to fact check me. This is something that I should say more of, but I obviously believe fact check me. Okay, the Bronze Age collapse. Probably precipitated by the Indo-Aryan invasions of Central Asia and Southwestern Asia, aka the ancient Near East or Middle East. The Bronze Age collapses where different civilizations that had become quite strong started to fall apart in the late teens BC, so 1800, 1700 BC. Areas like that. I believe the Middle Kingdom collapses in Egypt. And other kingdoms, right? And then eventually, every time a kingdom collapses, the Hyksos are responsible for that, and the Hyksos are eventually driven out. But the Hyksos bring the chariot. The Hittite Empire rises and collapses the Paleo-Babylonians, and they create, but they bring the chariot. They bring iron. So, despite these Indo-Aryan groups coming from Turkey and from Eastern Europe, and then migrating into the Middle East and into South Asia, where they will get to India. You see the fall of the Harappan civilization because of climatological and invasive factors. They will build up something new in the Iron Age, and that Iron Age will see the rise of the Vedic period in India with the Indo-Aryans. It'll see the rise of the Hittite Empire in the Near East, and it will see the rise of the New Kingdom, which will eventually throw out the Hyksos in Egypt. History on Christianity. Boy, that's a topic I've done, like the early history of Christianity on video and on live stream lectures. I am a history teacher. I teach various different types of history. Kiara, good to see you again. But Franklin, some history on Christianity. I'll just give a quick synopsis of the first century of Christianity. Basically, Jesus of Nazareth is a Jewish rabbi who believes himself to be the Messiah. He has a group of followers. He teaches certain ideas and parables, which every Jewish leader does during this time. He's seen as a hopeful unifying factor, but he claims to be the Jewish Messiah, which he doesn't have a idea of deliverance from the Roman Empire. He just kind of treats individual deliverance. He also claims to be the Jewish God, which is anathema to the Jewish leadership, who puts him on trial and then has him and the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, under extreme pressure from the Jews, fearing a revolt will cause the emperor to kill him because he had sided with the emperor's rival Sejanus, allows him to be crucified. He dies, and then, so according to his followers, this cult doesn't go away. Yes, it is a cult. It is a small group of believers within Judaism who believe that Jesus of Nazareth is the Jewish Messiah. Typically, when I refer to him historically, I do not say Jesus Christ because Christ is a messianic title. It is not a name. He is not Mr. Christ, like The Simpsons says. Is Jesus of Nazareth? Yeshua ben Joseph is probably a more Hebraic understanding of his name. But Jesus basically he dies, and his followers keep the spirit going, basically claiming he rose from the dead, and then spreading that message all throughout the ancient world. The writings of a Roman citizen who becomes a Christian, who was a former Jewish leader named Paul of Tarshish, makes some of the most important progress for Christianity. Being a Roman citizen, he has much more access to travel around the empire and spread the Christian message during the first century. He writes a series of letters about between 40 and 60 years after Jesus lives and dies. Some of his followers decide to start writing accounts of his life. These become the Christian Gospels, and there are several Gospels that are later accepted by the church and others that are rejected. The church is pretty much just a Jewish cult that is pejorative to many of the Jews, and eventually they are targeted by the Roman Emperor Nero. Christians constantly are facing persecution issues with the Roman Empire, sometimes in systematic ways, sometimes in isolated ways, throughout their first 3 centuries, because they refuse to acknowledge that Caesar could be a deity, because they acknowledge only one deity, and that is Jesus of Nazareth, or Jesus Christ. So by the end of the first century, Christianity is persecuted again by another Roman emperor, Domitian, who wants the Romans to go back to their old ways and worship their gods. But Christianity is on the cutting edge of religious orders, and after the Jewish temple is destroyed, it firmly cuts itself off from the Jewish religion, becoming kind of on its own from then on out. So there's some early Christian history. By the way, Paul and many of the other apostles of Jesus, the direct followers who were commissioned to follow him, are supposedly killed by Nero and during the Roman persecution. Some of them even go to other parts of the world and are killed, like Thomas, who supposedly went to India. This is all Christian legend and history written later and has no basis in outside accounts, but there is authentic history beyond that from Romans who absolutely hated and Jews who absolutely did not like the Christians, that they did in fact exist. They worshipped Christos, and they believed that this carpenter who had become a rabbi was God. And so there you have it. You don't have a full-out systematic theology of a Trinitarian Christianity that we see in evangelical or Catholic Christianity today, but you do have the beginnings of that in the 1st century AD. So there's a quick scoop of church history. Who was the first time forms carboning steel from iron, the samurai or the Vikings? I believe the Japanese did it before the Vikings. The martyr cult. Are you referring to the Christian church? Shroud of Turin proves God took him to heaven. Science is not just understanding that they can see his image, but yes, 100% smart, dude. So Jacob, I've read about the Shroud of Turin. I've looked into it. I'm an agnostic on the Shroud of Turin completely, and I know many people who are people of the Christian faith who really doubt its authenticity as well. I'm not saying I doubt its authenticity in the sense that I don't believe it. When I say I doubt, I'm not sure. Could it have been from the 1st century? It's possible. The fibers from middle of a garment seem to indicate a 1st century possible Palestinian origin. Others say that it is, which Palestinian is anachronistic, but whatever. I've been plenty anachronistic with the Romans. But other fibers taken from it date to the 14th or 15th century. So there's probably been some weaving and melding of fabrics from the Renaissance period and medieval period, which might indicate some doctoring of it. So I know about the Shroud of Turin. It's a fascinating image, and it has the image of what a lot of people have associated with Jesus of Nazareth, but I just don't know. Who was the first to purify carbon steel from the... Okay, I think I already answered that. Freshly, great to see you. Which emperor built the Getty Villa in Malibu? The Getty Villa is a fascinating place. So that would be J. Paul Getty, who was I think he was a steel and wood man, but he became exceptionally rich from Minnesota. I think he was lumber. He was a lumber tycoon, and he eventually became one of the biggest collectors of art. And the current California governor is actually related to him. Or at least married into his family. The Gettys have been one of the biggest Democratic donating families in American history, but they've also been the biggest in the preservation of art. So some really cool stuff there. How did the Tokugawa shogunate seclusion edict influence the development of regional trade networks in East Asia during the 17th and 18th centuries, and what impact did its isolationist policy have on the formation of Japanese national identity in the face of European colonial powers? Both Japan and China have had this cycle of openness and close to the Europeans. And by the way, the Europeans have had it themselves. But Japan, in the 19th century, they were consistent throughout the 17th, 18th centuries in not wanting the Europeans around. The Dutch were the only ones allowed to trade with the Japanese. I did a live stream lecture on Japanese Christianity a couple weeks ago. You would like Kiara. Again, live stream lectures every Sunday at 4 p.m. But the Chinese the Qing dynasty was in decline, the Tokugawa shogunate was in decline, and the Japanese were much more open to trading with the West to take advantage of it and to start industrializing, seeing the might of the Americans with Commodore Matthew Perry and then later the Brits. By the late 1860s, the Japanese realized that they would it wasn't expand or die, it was reach out and die. It was interact or die. And so China was in precipitous decline, and it only got worse when the Europeans basically bullied their way in there, and then the Chinese did not. And rather than having an idea that this would happen, the Chinese, like the Japanese did because of China was kind of the guinea pig that went canary in the coal mine. But really, the isolationist policies, like for the Chinese, the Ming and the Qing dynasties, at first allowed them to focus on their own growth and building, but eventually would really, really hurt their development, because by the time the Europeans show up by force in China and through more peaceful means in Japan, they are both significantly backwards compared to their European colleagues. And if they had remained, if the treasure fleets of Zheng He had continued in China in the 15th century, and if Japan had done something similar, had continued its interactions with the Portuguese and the Dutch from the 16th century, then it's very possible that both of them would have become almost as much embedded into the colonization of the New World as the Europeans were. Imagine the Japanese owning sections of the American West or sections of Western South America. And then, of course, there's also who knows, maybe China would have colonized the Philippines, something they want to do now. So there you go. Van Diemen's explorations, his maps, interesting. I should check that out. So yeah, she does. She does, Ozzy. She does give my brain a workout. She has extremely complex questions, very deep stuff, and she's extremely articulate. So Kiara, I really love the questions you ask. I mean, it could take hours. These are live stream lectures in and of themselves to explain just how much detail and information is necessary, but that I can give you quick synopsises of that as I can. Oh, yes. Yes. There you go. I'm glad you've been informed on it. And I appreciate you asking all of these questions. They're very helpful. So does anyone else have anything they would like to discuss? Other questions? We got about 5 minutes left in the live stream. And again, we'll be back Friday and Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's always sad to say goodbye for 5 days. But, and of course, check out the short form and long form content that drops during the week. We're on TikTok too, Friendly History there. And there's exclusive stuff I do on TikTok that I do not do here. So yeah, and if you want updates about the channel and things like that, cultural commentary, check out my X and check out my Substack where I write articles about different cultural and historical topics, so you get more than just my historical takes there. Have you seen Cleopatra, 1963 film, classic Hollywood depictions, Ben-Hur? Yes, those I think they called them sandal because they were wearing sandals, something like that, epics. Those were really, really good movies. They're interesting films. These 2.5, 3 hour movies, obviously they're very dated. Obviously they're not extremely historically accurate. Ben-Hur is complete historical fiction, by the way. Ben-Hur never existed. It is written by a Christian trying to talk about a man's conversion into Christianity, but is a fascinating depiction of Roman slavery. Cleopatra is the gross exaggeration of Cleopatra's. Something that historians have struggled with is understanding just how brilliant and cunning and intelligent and articulate and premeditating Cleopatra was, rather than just being a first century sex symbol to Caesar, Antony, and even Octavian. She was actually an extraordinarily thoughtful ruler and monarch. And I think that the Cleopatra of 1963 is a stunning film, especially when you consider its time. And it does show the rise and fall of Antony quite well, but it fails to show Cleopatra's well, it does sometimes. It doesn't. I think a lot of depictions of her have failed to show through the centuries just how intelligent and prepossessing she actually was. Thank you so much, Inoue affiliate. I really appreciate you. Was 20th century fascism futuristic or conservative? It was definitely revolutionary. You can't have. It's hard for me to say. A lot of people say that fascism is a right-wing ideology, and I'm okay with that in certain aspects. But it's hard for me to say it's conservative in the same form as a Republican conservative or a conservative in Great Britain or Canada, because classic conservative thought typically tends to be preservative, wanting to hold on to what this culture has had for a while. Fascism only has come to power through means of revolution, upheaval, civil war, and basically commandeering all of the same traditional aspects of society that conservatives like and using them as a mouthpiece for your agenda. This is why the Catholic Church highly supported Francisco Franco. The idea that they supported the Nazis is a little exaggerated, but it's also why they supported Mussolini, because despite Mussolini especially having these socialistic roots, Mussolini was very well aware of that he could not separate Italy from any sort of Catholic identity. And so that's why he's actually the one that created Vatican City. So it is futuristic, it's revolutionary. It's conservative in the sense that it embraces certain elements of the culture and allows them to protect them, whether it's the big business interest or it's traditional values, religion, things like this. This is why people on the right, especially the far right, who feel disenchanted with political movements that are supposed to be center-right, like the conservatives in Great Britain, and sometimes even people feel this about Republicans in the United States, or conservatives in Canada, or the Christian Democrats in Germany. They become much more interested in national front-like policies, the AfD, Reform Party, and are susceptible to having a more blasé approach and view of fascism. Where, oh, maybe Vichy and maybe Franco were right about these things. It's that it undergirds that these authoritarian dictators were authoritarian dictators, and that means all of the bells and whistles of repression, lack of control, and cruelty were in their war chest for Pinochet, for Perón, for Jorge Vidal in Argentina, for Noriega, and for Franco, and for Mussolini. Most influential First Lady, any thoughts? Oh my goodness, I'm almost finished my First Lady series exclusively on Patreon. It's tough because we're such slaves of the present, because everyone wants to say Hillary Clinton for good or for bad, or Michelle Obama, or Jackie Kennedy. Eleanor Roosevelt certainly comes to mind. Mary Todd Lincoln was extremely influential. Martha Washington kind of is the one who set the ball running. Rosalind Carter started the idea of the First Lady being more than just a nice, pretty lady, but actually being an activist. I just think I have to go with it's close. It's a toss-up. It's Jackie Kennedy or it's Mary Todd Lincoln. Extremely influential. I gotta put notifications on. Great live, like stream. Can't wait to see the next subject. Yes, you guys get to vote on the. Actually, you don't get to vote on the next one because Vincent, because of his donations, which I so appreciate, is getting to pick next week's live stream lecture, and I think he picked something on Scotland, so we're going to be talking about some Scottish history. In what ways did the political and cultural tensions between the Crown of Castile and Crown of Aragon during the late Middle Ages influence the formation of a unified Spanish identity, and how did these internal dynamics shape Spain's approach to the empire building in the early modern period? It's interesting that Spain let the woman, the Queen of Castile, which was the superior kingdom, Leon had merged with Castile, and they were superior to Aragon, and therefore their ruler, the Queen Isabella, was more formidable in Spain's development, both through its chartering of expeditions to rival the Portuguese, and in its destruction of the Emirate of Granada, and in its suppression of Jewish and Muslim peoples in Iberia. Spain was a Castilian kingdom with a nod to Aragon, and it was a woman, Isabella, who pushed everything forward, for better or for worse. Where does Sydney Sweeney's accent come from? Is she fascist? Is that American Eagle behind you as a nod? This is not an American Eagle. This is the Roman Eagle. This is the Roman standard. This is a really cool thing. So Roman armies would carry these into battle, and the person who would hold them was called the standard bearer. And the standard it's the eagle, and it's also the SPQR at the bottom, which is Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people in Rome, and the bird is the representative of Jupiter. So although the fact that fascists have used this was used by the Byzantines, this was used by a bunch of different people. Later they added the double eagle, that's the Byzantines. The Austro-Hungarians did it, the Russians did it. It's not necessarily a fascist symbol. The fascists used it too because Mussolini was in love with the Roman Republic and Roman Empire, which is the fasce was an ancient Roman symbol too, by the way. A bundle of sticks held together with an axe on the top, representing militarism and unity. Sydney Sweeney, I don't know about her accent. I don't really care. She does look really good in jeans, I have to say. But she's not a fascist. It's really, that is so overblown, the whole American Eagle thing. She has good genes. What she's saying is, A, she has good genes because she looks good. B, she has good genes because obviously her parents must have been very good looking for her to be that beautiful. It has nothing to do with the eugenics of the fascists in Germany. And is it a nod? They should dub her voice. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I haven't really watched the commercials. I think I remember it. Her voice is fine. Not as fine as she is, but actually, do you know the history of jeans? Levi's, are they very American? It was a German-American immigrant who created the modern concept of jeans using denim, Levi Strauss, and of course, that's where Levi's come from, and this was in the late 1840s during the gold rush in California. Edith Wilson was extremely influential. She basically ran the country. So there you go. And Joe Biden might be in the same boat based on what some people are thinking. A Canadian tuxedo, a jean jacket. I love the what is it, Futurama, Family Guy, where they have a Native American jean jacket store for jeans and jean jackets. Simon looks cool, right? My family in Spain has eagles all over the house because they supported the Francoist party back then and was one of their symbols. Yes. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, Franco is a more tame version of Mussolini, who was a far more tame version of Hitler. But I mean, Franco was a nasty guy. There's no doubt about it. But it is interesting the way he stayed in power by basically going from being authoritarian to open. He had a liberalizing tendency that Mussolini did not have. And if Mussolini had had that, he would not have allied with the Third Reich, and he would have been allowed to stay in power until he died. And he would have been an ally to the US in the beginning of the Cold War, assuming the rest of the war went the way it did. It's an interesting thing. Mussolini did not want, like the Nazi propaganda about the Aryans, because he wasn't an Aryan. And he didn't necessarily admire Hitler all that much, but became more of an admirer because Hitler did exactly what he had done in Ethiopia. Yeah. And something that Franco learned from Mussolini and Hitler was, if I'm going to stay in power, I'm not just going to be able to conquer people, even places I would love to colonize. So he kind of checked and passed it along. So, did you know the German chocolate cake was created by an American named Sam German? Interesting. I wonder if he was a German immigrant. German immigrants, I mean, hot dogs and hamburgers, some of the biggest stuff. I mean, that in American food, that's all German. Wieners and bratwursts and Hamburg. Any Brits had a Sunday roast today? I wanted to hear about the history of this tradition. I will take to get a Yorkshire pudding with gravy when you visit. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait. So, all right. Let's get back to the Gold Rage studies. I'm okay. I'm all right. I like having running water, or at least electricity. But yes, we are over an hour because everybody had such great questions. And somebody asked me about Sydney Sweeney, so I got distracted. Sorry. If you don't like the ad, you don't like the ad. She's good looking. I don't understand why people argue against this. You're allowed to your wrong opinion. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, Eric has something. Supposedly, the first hamburger was served in Connecticut. Not surprising. It was a mixture between two meats from Hamburger, Germany, for meatballs crushed down in interesting, 2 slices of bread. I don't know if it was in Connecticut. There was, but I mean, it is a sandwich. I like calling burgers sandwiches just to distract people, but they are technically sandwiches. All right, thank you everyone for joining us. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. All of that good stuff, yada yada. Been a nice, good hour, some good Q&A at the end. We got about 30 minutes of that in after a very nice session talking about the Roman kingdoms. So I really hope you learned something and enjoyed all of that. Go and check out other live stream lectures. My long-form video on the Roman kings has even more information. Some stuff that it was dodgy in my mind today was definitely not dodgy in that video. I think you'll really enjoy that one. But yeah, take care. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you for being here. And make sure to show some love to Simon, my wonderful moderator, and Hars, who did such a good job. The social medias are pinned because Hars got here and put them in. I think he had to leave, but it was great seeing him. And yeah, we missed Harry this weekend. We didn't get any Harry, which is so sad. Hopefully he's okay. But we will be back next Friday. Really looking forward to that. And then we've got a fun weekend. And I'm glad I waited this long because we got Eric. Eric, thank you so much. Eric, I'm going to let you pick, I appreciate your donations and your constant support. Eric, I'm going to let you pick next Monday, my video. Next Sunday, Vincent already has the live stream lecture, but Eric, you get to pick the video I do for next Monday. So hopefully if we get enough members and the channel keeps going, we'll have member-only lives, member-only chats, and we will have member-only videos. And members get early releases and their shorts that are just for members. So yes, Eric, I'm looking forward to whatever video topic you want me to do. Think about it during the weekend. Let me know for next Monday. Long-form videos every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and the one a week from tomorrow will be compliments of the great Eric. Really appreciate having you here. Yes, and I want a holiday to Simon. We all, and no need to pay. We'll get you here. All right. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Have a great week, and remember, as always, love history. Bye-bye now.